call the meeting to order. Welcome. Thank you for being here. We'll begin with the chair's report tonight. Just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded for future broadcast. Our chair's report is Lunenburg. It is homecoming weekend. It is Miles for Miles road race. So Saturday, homecoming events will begin at noon with the parade leaving from Turkey Hill Elementary School, parading down back through high school, viewing of the floats, and then our homecoming game at 2 p.m. versus Murdoch. And on Sunday, we have our Miles for Miles race. Prior to that, we will have the dedication of the Mulligan-McCarran track and field and bench. It's after at 2, sorry, 2. So it's 11 for Miles and 2 for the start of Miles for Miles and 2 p.m. for the dedication. My apologies for switching that up. So it is a Lunenburg weekend. I think that's about it for that. So we would move on to reviewing and approving warrants, and we do have a line item transfer tonight.
So the line item transfer you have before you tonight is an additional $575. The transfer will be from the sewer dumping fees line into the new equipment line. This is an additional $575 for Mr. Wanda for the tractor snow removal.
Was it just the estimate was off on that?
Yes, there was something that wasn't factored into that.
That's the one that we approved last time?
Yes.
So do we need a motion to amend?
Nope, there's an additional line item
Okay.
transfer
Okay.
for the $575.
Okay.
Do you need a motion to approve? I'll move to accept the line item transfer for $575.
And I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So we will review and approve our October 3rd regular session meeting minutes. Everybody have a chance to look at those?
Yeah.
We did. So does someone want to make a motion?
I'll move to accept the October 3rd meeting minutes.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So that's 3 of 5 that we know at that meeting. So it's just Carol, Jim, and Meredith. Next, we have superintendent's report.
Okay. Pretty brief report tonight because we have updates from the building principals, so I'll save some of the good news for them to share. Just to note that parent-teacher conferences for the middle high school are coming on October 23rd. And just for additional clarification, this year we're piloting that model where just the schools that are having the parent-teacher conference are releasing students early for early dismissal. This is not a district-wide early dismissal. It will be a regular scheduled day for Turkey Hill and the primary school on the 23rd. I have had some communication from parents. They're concerned about this particular model, as many of them depend on the older children to provide care for the younger children. We will put together a survey to solicit some feedback from parents about this model in November after we move past the early release date for the Turkey Hill primary on the 13th. I would like to make you aware that we're pondering and have done some outreach to Monty Tech on a couple of projects that we have ideas about to gather an estimate for cost. We are in a position where we need some additional storage for sports equipment, particularly located near the fields on Mass Ave. So we're going to contact Monty Tech and see if it's a possibility to have a team of students, some of them might be former Lunenburg students, to come out and build us a storage shed. The bonus of working with Monty Tech is we would have the shed built for the caustic materials only. And it's a great project for them to be involved in. So we'll see if we can get an estimate on the cost for materials so that we can know if that's something that we can budget for in the next cycle. Additionally, we're exploring the cost for jazzing up our athletic golf cart a little bit with our Blue Knights logo. Again, if Monty Tech did this, it really would be just for the cost of the paints to provide that additional little touch of Lunenburg spirit. So we'll get back to you once we have some additional information on that. And homecoming, Dawn Guerin took me on a little tour this week. I was able to go visit sites where the freshman team and the junior team were working on their floats. Pretty impressive. They still had a lot of work ahead to be ready for Saturday, so I can't wait to see what that final product looks like. Pretty excited about that. So that's all I have for an update.
Thank you. So moving on, we do not have a dedicated student rep report tonight, but as Dr. Burnham had said, we're going to hear from all of our buildings, so we will obviously get to hear from what's going on in all around the district. And moving on to new business, school updates, speaking of that.
Yeah, so I'd invite all of the principals to come up to the table.
Thank you.
That's a little teamwork thing there, right?
Okay, so everybody has a little update report for you, so can we start with you, Mrs. Champagne?
Absolutely. So good evening. First of all, thanks for having me. Heidi Champagne, Turkey Hill Elementary School principal. We started with our literacy support and fundraising. We have our Scholastic Book Fair coming up next week. It will run from October 22nd to 26th. I sent out an email to parents requesting that they consider using, I think Scholastic calls it an e-wallet, which means that they send the money in electronically, so there's no losing of dollars or sharing of dollars or being sad about dollars, but the money would all be electronically accessible with whatever limit the parents have set. So I'm anxious to see how many parents have taken advantage of that opportunity. I hope they have. We were the recipient of 150 books from the Subaru Loves Learning initiative. The North End Subaru, two gentlemen came out and contributed 150 beautiful science-based picture books, nonfiction, all around the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade reading levels. This is the second year in a row that they've done that for us, so special shout out to Subaru for that. And also we raised, with the invaluable assistance of the PTO, $6,100 for our Penny Wars. We hit our mark as usual. It was pretty amazing. 1 week of Penny War madness. Our class sizes currently run between a low of 22 to a high of 25. Grade 4 and 5 have 22 to 24, and grade 3 has 23 to 25. So we have 5 sections in 3rd and 4th grade and 6 sections of 5th grade. Our professional development, we were fortunate enough to participate in a district-wide trauma training. We also joined, or our 3rd grade teachers joined the primary school for Project Read. Some of our teachers have already attended an Empowering Writers workshop. We, as a school, had both an epilepsy awareness training as well as a mindfulness training. Also participated in some everyday math, especially the online components, and looking forward to some Readers Workshop training, both sort of an intensive effort at school for our third grade teachers, as well as some conference opportunities with Lucy Calkins herself for a couple of our teachers who are taking advantage of that. Our activities and clubs, we have Girls on the Run. It's up and running, 20 girls. Chess Club has a solid 13. Big Sibs, Little Sibs is scheduled to start next Wednesday, and it will involve 30 to 35 students from Turkey Hill, as well as 30 students from the high school. And new this year, because we have a new music teacher, Mr. Blankenship, he's managed to entice 36 fifth graders to join band. Oh yeah, 36 of them. So it's very cool to see them all walking around quite proudly with their instruments. So that's one particular highlight we're really excited about. And finally, field trips. Nature's Classroom, of course, first week of October, 105 students attended. It was very successful. We have weekly field trips set up right now with the Lunenburg Public Library. Our grade 5 students are going over twice, so once a month. Each class is going over. So it's a weekly visit, but they're just rotating. And finally, and I had the date wrong in the original, I don't know if it was updated, but on November 29th, the entire third grade is going to go to Monty Tech to see the Nutcracker. So that's our current state of affairs at the elementary school.
Thank you for having me here tonight to kind of give you a building update. So I'm going to kind of start with the more exciting kind of things that are going on in our building, and then the less exciting but just as important other things I want to talk about, like class sizes and professional development. At the middle school this year, 260 kids are participating in an after-school activity or athletics, and I think that's just a wonderful opportunity for middle school kids. I know it's part of our strategic plan to provide more enrichment and after-school opportunities for kids at the middle school level. We have our perennial ski club and cross-country and science Olympiad that bring in a lot, but we also have other clubs and activities this year. We're starting a drama club. We have a school newspaper that we're beginning to start. We're trying to get off the ground a National Honor Society-run art club for middle school kids that runs in conjunction with the high school. Just coming into the building at 3:45 or going home at about 4 o'clock and seeing 60 or 70 middle school kids engaged in an activity is just a wonderful thing, and just great opportunities for our kids to be engaged after school. So one of our highlights of the year is that we're increasing those opportunities for kids after school. Our class sizes, I have in your report that it's 398. Actually, tomorrow will be 399. We're welcoming in a new 6th grader, but you know, our class sizes for grade 6 range from about 24 to 25 per class. Grade 7, 23 to 24, and grade 8 is 21 to 22, with 127 at grade 8. And I think you remember that was a strategic move to put 6 teachers at the 8th grade level. We wanted to utilize those science labs for both 8th grade with the next step generation science standards that we were implementing last year. Dr. Burnham will talk about our science and technology scores. Seems like it was a strong strategic move in order for that to happen. So we wanted to see what the effect would be with smaller class sizes. And also we have a bump of 144 moving there next year, so we have a little bit of stability. We're going to have to keep our 6 teachers there at that group, so they'll have been teaching those content areas for 2 years straight. Professional development, the trauma training that was district-wide that our middle school teachers took part in. We've also been doing some really meaningful vertical teaming, not only not with the high school, they've been more involved with the NIAS, but building-based vertical teaming to determine what our strengths and weaknesses are as kids move throughout the grades in their content areas. Teachers did our annual ALICE training, and I also sent out the videos for students, 8th grade students tomorrow are going to participate in an ALICE student training during our advisory group. Other teachers are also going to be involved in some writing workshops. Some of the data shows that at different grade levels, we might be at or a little bit below the state average in our writing scores, so we want to kind of target those and make sure that we're strengthening them as we move forward. And then we've been involved with the Great Books Foundation now for several years. We have not provided professional development in 2 years, so hoping to reinvent that relationship that we had, provide a couple training opportunities for other districts, maybe during a full-day PD, in order to get some other trainings for my middle school and for the elementary school, high school, maybe do a little horse trading so we can get some different opportunities for teachers here. School council, they'll be named by the end of the week. We've had several volunteers, so it didn't need to go to an electoral process. We didn't have enough people that were interested in serving, so everyone that was interested in serving is going to be serving on the School Advisory Council. Our first meeting will be on October 28th. That's a Tuesday at 3:30. Open meeting, of course, so public's always welcome. We have those at the Lunenburg Middle High School large conference room. And we're in the middle of Spirit Week, and tomorrow is Meme Day. I had to look that up, what Meme Day was. But for middle school, we made Meme Day / Pajama Day, so it made it easy. So you can come in your pajamas for tomorrow. But overall, just a wonderful start at the middle school. Kids are involved and invested and engaged in not only their academics, but other opportunities as well. Do you have any questions?
Just one thing, you mentioned the Alice training, not to be confused with an Alice drill.
Exactly. So in large caps I wrote in there that this is not a drill, but this is the student training, and it's the video actually that was approved by School Advisory Council and our Lunenburg PD and the admin from last year. So all 8th graders have already seen these videos. They've had the opportunity to watch them with their parents as well as teachers, and then debriefing with administrators and guidance counselors during those advisory blocks, which makes it a little more convenient to be able to have small, intimate conversations with kids if they need them.
I'll underline that.
Yeah, no drill. It's just the training that they have engaged in last year. Thank you.
Mr. McKenna.
Thank you for having me. I'm Steve McKenna, the interim principal at the primary school, and I'm pleased to report that we received word from the state last week that we have been awarded a literacy grant for $6,500. The focus of that grant is primarily professional development. We have a request out for teacher participants, one from the kindergarten level, one from the first grade level, and one from the second grade level, and those 3 teachers along with me will serve as a leadership team, getting the professional development opportunities through the state. And just as a little bit of background, this is a grant that is kind of an extension of a grant that I worked on with the state the first 2 years that I was retired. And they start with literacy institutes, and those literacy institutes, they bring in high-powered presenters in the field of literacy. The goal of this grant is really increasing the opportunities for kids in kindergarten through 3rd grade to be readers by the time that they're in 3rd grade. So this grant will include those literacy institutes, 3 of those that will take place over the course of the year. There's a follow-up meeting for those teachers that will take place after each one of the institutes, so that there's a continuation of a theme that takes place at the institute and it doesn't get dropped along the way. So it's really a good focus for professional development, so that it's a comprehensive, long-term, sustained effort at supporting teachers and getting more skilled at literacy instruction. My goal will be to have that then translate back to the classrooms and grade level teams, so that my collaboration with grade level teams will infuse those learning opportunities into the classrooms from kindergarten through 2nd grade. We do have 3 teachers that have come forward expressing interest already, waiting on the posting for that to close, and hopefully we'll hear more from the state soon. They're indicating that we should be hearing soon, so the first institute will probably be within the next month. Other parts of that grant include substitutes, funds funds to cover the substitutes while the teachers are participating in the trainings, as well as $1,000 that is dedicated to materials for the school itself related to literacy. So again, it's a pretty comprehensive opportunity with the $6,500 to infuse some more opportunities for really strengthening our literacy program. Continuing with that literacy theme, our professional development in September and again on November 6th is dedicated to a focus on Project READ. And Project READ is a direct multisensory approach for literacy instruction. It infuses phonics experiences for the kids, ties it to the introduction of the sound and symbol of letters, and also infuses a bit of a handwriting piece with it, so that it's kind of a comprehensive flow across that literacy. What I was really excited about was coming out of that first training, teachers, the majority of teachers have chosen a literacy focus for their evaluation goals this year. And a lot of them are tying that to specifically the Project READ training, and both in their professional practice goal as well as their student learning goals. So key student learning goals are tied right into the new learning that teachers are getting from that Project READ training. As I said, the second training is scheduled for the 6th of November, and the Project READ group has been very, very open with us in allowing us to tell them what we're really looking for in the training, so we're not just getting a stand-pat training, we're getting the kinds of information delivered to us that are really pertinent to the school at this point in time. You have class sizes in the report. I think it's important to reference the preschool class sizes for those of you that may not understand how preschool works. The preschool is a federally mandated program. The town needs to provide a program for children with identified special needs starting at age 3, and because 3-year-olds continue to happen throughout the course of the year, the program expands over the course of the year. Every time a new child gets to 3 years old, if they're identified with special needs, they automatically enter our preschool program. So the numbers, while they look a little bit low in some areas right now, that program expands over the course of the year as new children are identified. It's an integrated preschool in most cases, where children with special needs are integrated with typically developing children, and in some cases we do not have the wherewithal to do that, so in my notes where you see substantially separate, those are classes that are just directed for kids with identified special needs. The kindergarten numbers go from 23 to 25. The first grade numbers go from 20 to 24. Some of you may look at that and say, well, how come that teacher's only got 20? Over the course of the summer, class lists were already developed. Some kids moved in, some kids moved out, and so we ended up with a little bit of unbalance there. But as kids move in, that class of 20 will end up getting the newer kids. Same thing happened with second grade. Those numbers go from 22 to 25. Our school council met in the beginning of the month. It's a vibrant group. It's a group that's really looking forward to diving into the 3 goals that we have this year and focusing on improvements for the school. They were excited at the invitation to provide me with some suggestions that I will at one point share with you relative to the fiscal 20 budget. And that's really one of the main focuses of the school council, is to have input into the school budget. And so I said to them, think outside the box. Where do we really need some support, some expansion of programs, some enhancement of program? It's important to get those on the page, not necessarily that they can be funded in the course of this coming year, but to inform you as you make decisions about the budget as a whole. That's kind of the primary report. Questions?
Okay. Mr. McGrath?
Good evening. Thank you for having me. So we're right in the middle of Spirit Week. The hallways are definitely alive. Today was Lunenburg Pride Day, so everyone was wearing their blue and white. We're prepping for the weekend. The class advisors feel like they're working around the clock with the kiddos. They're doing a great job. So our festivities, and Wendy had mentioned earlier, our festivities are kicking off at 12 for the parade. Before the game, there is going to be the ceremony for both the senior cheerleaders as well as the senior football players. After the post-game festivities will be the presentation of the annual Brockleman Award, and obviously the marching band is going to have their performance, which is always a wonderful performance. And then will be the announcement of the winning of the float. The floats are always awesome. It is competitive, so there is a winner, but the floats are all awesome. They always are, and they do such a great job. One thing that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, over the years, and I just think it's the buildup of the week. The kiddos are working so hard at night, and then they spend so much time Friday night, and then we have all the events on Saturdays. The dance that was scheduled for Saturday night has been canceled because everyone we polled, it was going to be very, very low numbers showing up. And the past few years, the class who's put the dance on has kind of gone in the hole monetarily, and they want that money to go to either the semi or the prom. So when the freshman class advisor, who always puts on the homecoming dance, polled the students, it was going to be very difficult to even break even with food and getting a DJ. We're also having a semi-formal that I think has a lot more pull that I think the kids are going to be going to. So the class advisor did make the decision to cancel the dance just from a lack of interest. And I just think, because here in Lunenburg, our festivities during the day and the Friday night, the kids are up so late getting those floats together that they just kind of run out of gas for Saturday night. We've also tried the dance on Friday nights, but we have those, they're pretty low attended as well because they're all working on floats. So we've tried a few different things to spark interest, and we'll continue to do that. We certainly want to do whatever we can to help the students, but it's just, I think the week is spent between Spirit Week. We have our pep rally on Friday, so student council is prepping for that. So there are a lot of activities, and I just think by the end of the night, the kids are tired. And then we have all the festivities on Sunday with Miles for Miles, and then the dedication. So we'll continue. If we have interest, we'll certainly have a homecoming dance. Next year we'll certainly continue to try to do that as long as there's interest. I just think it's the class doesn't want to go in the negative monetarily, because they want to make sure prom is a big hit, because prom is very well attended. So the high school also participated in the professional development, the trauma training. After the trauma training, the high school broke off into our NEASC groups. We've been working on our 5 priority NEASC growth areas. That went very well. We're going to continue with those areas going forward on the next professional development as well. I needed to give to NEASC my school improvement plan. I had to get that to them with all of the groups and what we're going to be doing going forward to get the priority growth areas in line. Music just had their cookie dough orders come in today, so that was a very exciting day for music. Yearbook is also, it's never too late to order the yearbook, and Mrs. Giuliani wanted me to get that out there. There is a break for students. If they order the yearbook before October 26th, they will only have to pay $55. After that, the price will jump up to $60. So anyone who wants to get in early, they get a better price than if they wait. A couple other highlights. We have been really promoting the Interface, which is a town-wide option for referrals for counseling, and that is something that any parents that are coming in, we're certainly trying to promote that as much as we can, because it's an awesome thing for the town and for the town. My school council, very similar to Mr. Santry, did not have enough for votes, so everyone who expressed interest is going to be on the school council. I'm going to be having my school council, my first meeting on October 30th. We also are going to be, and I want to make it clear, just like Mr. Santry said, it's not a drill. We're going to be showing the same videos that we showed last year next week in our advisories, our ALICE training videos. I did send that out to all students and parents. I also sent that out to staff. We also have a particular script that's going to be read to the students. And again, that's just videos that were approved by the school councils last year, and we showed the same videos last year as we're showing this year. I've spoken with Officer McNamara, our resource officer. He's around during all lunches and advisories, and he will be available. He's out next week, but he will be available after that for any questions that students might have, or if they have any concerns. We're certainly working side by side with the Lunenburg Police on any of our ALICE trainings. And when we do have a drill, we will certainly be working with the superintendent, Mr. Santry, and obviously the Lunenburg Police to organize that drill. But next week is not, it's just training videos is what next week is, to make that clear. Good news on clubs. We have well over 200 students involved in clubs. Some clubs have numbers as high as 35 or 40. We just had our club fair last week. On Tuesday, we had the freshmen and sophomores down in the CAF going over all the clubs and the club options. And then during Thursday advisory, we had the juniors and seniors go to the club fair during advisory time. So SAD is looking like there's Students Against Destructive Decisions. They're going to have, at a minimum, 35 members. Latin Club is strong. Art Club, Big Sibs is another big club, 30 to 40. Art Club is taken off this year. That's up to 30 members. Student Council's at 30 members. The Nightly News with Paul Harmon, that's 32 members. Hunger Task Force, which is always a big hit, that's at 40 members. National Honor Society at 60 members. Marching Band at 37. So it's very exciting to see all the options that students have to choose from, and that these clubs are really being utilized. And it makes me happy, because the more students are involved, the more likely they're going to be successful. So it's good to see those numbers where they are. Our class sizes are great. I like where they are. They're very similar to what they've been in previous years. Most of our classes are in the high teens to low 20s, and that's really like to be at the high school level. There are some classes that are below that. Most of those classes tend to be our AP classes. Obviously, those classes you don't usually end up with high numbers, because those are the highest end classes. But our classes are definitely similar to what they've been in the past, and I'm very happy with the average class size at the high school. So I think that's it. Do you have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'd ask you all to stay where you are, have Juliana Hanson switches. So, as Carol had indicated about a month or so ago, after attending a workshop through MASC, there's a shift this year in how we're determining accountability. So I actually pulled the slides from a PowerPoint that was put together by the Department of Ed relative to the overall performance of the state, and then embedded slides with our own data as well. So this is the report taken directly from the state. So as you can see on the left, they've got grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 listed in the performance categories. The red, not meeting expectations, that's the lowest performance category. The orange is partially meeting expectations. Green is meeting expectations. And the blue is exceeding expectations. So you can see that it's fairly consistent across the board where the percentages kind of lay out in each of the grades. On the right-hand side, you can see the changes. Last year was the first year of this next generation MCAS test. So we have now a baseline to compare performance this year. And they've taken a look at grades 3 through 8, scaled scores from 2017 compared to 18. And you can see in the far right column here what the change is. At the third grade, there's been an increase of 3.4 points. Grade 4 is up 2.6, 5 is at 3, grade 6 is up 1.6, grade 7, took a little backslide there, down 2.1 points compared to last year. And 8th grade remained pretty steady, with a little plus there, 0.3. The overall, when you look at all grades 3 through 8, we're up on average 1.5 points. Now this is the same for math. Again, you can see the color bands for the different performance categories. When you take a look at the changes for mathematics this year, grade 3 is up 1.1 points. Grade 4, pretty much unchanged, it's down 0.1. Grade 5 down 1.1, grade 6 down 0.6, grade 7 down 1.1, grade 8 down 0.8. So they're really pretty steady there. Not a lot of change in performance this year compared to last. If anything, the overall is down just a bit. So when we take a look at the legacy test, that's the 10th grade ELA and math, as well as the science test in all grades 5, 8, and 10. And what they're showing you here is the performance over time. So you can see that there's a blue line, a red line, and a green line. The blue is the English, the math is red, and science is green. And you can see that this particular graph starts back with data from 2007 on forward. And you can see from about 2013 or so, most of these tests, they've kind of leveled out. The performance has been pretty stable and consistent for both ELA and math for the last handful of years. You can see that there's still a little bit of an uptick, though, on the science testing. Then when you look over to the right-hand side of the slide here, you've got the 5th grade science and technology in the blue and the 8th grade science and technology in the green. Again, fairly steady performance, and generally speaking, the 5th grade performance scores are a little bit higher than the 8th grade. So now let's talk about the new accountability. Prior years, we were labeled with a number. We were a level 1, we were a level 2, and so on. They've moved away from those labels, and this is one of the slides that was pulled together by the state. During this first year of accountability, this new model of accountability, they're going to be taking a look to see if they want to make any tweaks or refinements to this new system. This year, the Commissioner is not going to name any additional underperforming or chronically underperforming schools. As a matter of fact, 4 schools have been released from the underperforming status this year at the Commissioner's discretion. 68% of the Massachusetts schools were shown to be improving or better under the new system of accountability. And this year, the Department of Ed has designated 51 schools as schools of recognition. So they are really high performance. When we take a look at this new accountability system, overall the accountability classification, the category that you fall into, prior years would have been the level 1, 2, 3, and so on, 74% of the schools have been designated as not requiring assistance or intervention. So basically this year there are 2 categories. You're either in the category of requiring assistance or intervention, or you're in the category of not requiring assistance or intervention. And they break down a little bit more, and we'll see that as we move through. I bolded there the 74% because that's where our schools fall in. We fall into that grouping of 74%. All of our schools are not requiring assistance or intervention. Overall accountability classification for districts, 90% of districts are designated as not requiring assistance or intervention, and again, it's bolded, we fall in that general group as well. When we take a look at accountability categories by school, 31% are categorized as meeting their targets, 53% as partially meeting their targets. That's where we fall in. And again, the same, the 51 schools of recognition. There are schools that are deemed in need of broad comprehensive support. Those used to be the level 4. There are still 26 schools that have been designated as that underperforming. However, there are 4 schools that were previously designated as chronically underperforming, and they have been released. There are schools in need of focused, targeted support, and there are 131 schools among the lowest 10% schools in Massachusetts that fall into that category. Other circumstances that will land your school in the category of focused, targeted support really come back to your graduation rate. If your graduation rate is too low, you will end up in this category. If you have low subgroup performance, any subgroup, all you have to have is one subgroup have a poor performance, and you could land in this category. And also, if you don't hit that 95% participation rate, you can see of the 131 schools that are the lowest 10%, you can see that there's a high number of schools here that end up in this category because of the participation. As far as accountability categories for the districts, again, Lunenburg falls in with 75% of districts that are categorized as partially meeting targets. So we're in the 90% not requiring assistance or intervention. But then when you break down that category, there are subcategories. You either are partially meeting targets, not needing assistance, meeting targets, not needing assistance, or performing extraordinarily well in one of those schools of recognition. All 3 of those subcategories fall under the overall category of not needing assistance or intervention. So each district and school gets a report that looks like this, and you can see down low, each school, each district will receive a percentage and an identification in terms of meeting your target. And as I've already said, Lunenburg is partially meeting the target at this 59% rate. For districts, there's no accountability percentile. The accountability percentile is comparing schools against schools that are similar in structure. So we, as a district, don't have an accountability percentile. But you can see when we take a look at these reports, here's one for Lunenburg High School, 54% partially meeting target. And compared to other high schools, you can see we're in the 69th percentile. So we're in the upper third, which is good news. When we take a look at Lunenburg Middle School, you've got the progress toward the targets at 39%, partially meeting the target, and the accountability percentile is at 62%, in the 62nd percentile. So again, we're in the upper quadrants for the middle school as well. Then we take a look at Turkey Hill, and we see Turkey Hill, 71% partially meeting target. The threshold to hit Meeting target is 75. We're close there. But then the irony is that with the accountability percentile, we're at the 44th percentile compared to other schools with these grade levels. So we've got some work to do there. But look at that, we're almost there at that 75% mark. Again, they give us a whole lot of data that we can look at. And this is how they figure out those points. We earn points, whether we are meeting our target, we've improved but didn't meet our target. So there are points that are awarded, and there are indicators this year. So in addition to achievement and growth, in order to determine the degree to which we're meeting our targets, they're also factoring in high school completion, our graduation rate, progress of our students on English language proficiency, and there are other indicators such as chronic absenteeism and advanced coursework completion. So you'll see advanced coursework completion is not a factor at the elementary or the middle school grades, but it is a factor at the high school level, as is the high school completion a factor only at the high school level. So they assign weights to these categories. You earn your points, then they multiply by the weight, and then you get your percentage. So, let me go back. Down here, Rob, can you see that? Is that 63%?
That is 63%.
63%. So that is the calculation based on non-high school. And then when we flip on over to the other side, we see a 52%.
Good eyes.
Yeah, and that's a stretch because I can't actually see, even with my glasses. Then you take, because it's a district, you factor in both the non-high school points that you've earned and all have been weighted, and the high school points that you've earned, which have different weights because there are other components that factor in. And then you take the average of those two and you get your percentage. And you can see that, for the other schools, they've done the same sort of thing. You factor in, you calculate for your all students category and for your lowest performing students category, and they get those percentages. So on this one here, you can see that we've got the 41% for all students, 36% for the lowest performing, and the average is the 39%. So partially meeting targets. And again, this is just another example of a different school. So here you can see if you show decline, you're getting 0 points. No change, you stay at 1 point. If you show some improvement, but not hitting your target, 2. If you meet your target, you get 3. You exceed your target, you get 4. And you can see how they're translating that to percentages. 68% of schools across the state receive a targeted percentage of 50 or higher, indicating that the school is improving. Only 8% of schools had target percentage of less than 25, indicating that the school overall is in decline compared to a year ago. So just to summarize it all quickly on one page for you, again, the district partially meeting targets at 59%. Again, remember that goal of that threshold for meeting your targets. You've got to hit that 75% mark. Turkey Hill at 71, and their accountability percentile compared to other schools like them, 44. The middle school's at 39 with their percentile at 62, and the high school at 54% meeting targets, and with a 69 percentile compared to other high schools. So, again, there are 2 different versions of MCAS that we need to be talking about, and in terms of performance. So there's the next generation MCAS test, which is ELA and mathematics, for grades 3 through 8. They have performance categories of not meeting standards, partially meeting standards, and exceeding standards. And you can see the raw scores range for each of those categories. And then there's the legacy test, the traditional MCAS that we are so familiar with, that is for ELA and math in the 10th grade, science for 5th grade, 8th grade, and 10th grade. And again, you've got advanced, proficient, warning, failing, and again, the ranges for the raw scores there. So this is a summary of growth and achievement side by side. These results here are for Turkey Hill, for ELA. You can see in the red, I took a look at the students with disabilities subgroup. So in the dark font, you can see all students. Meeting or exceeding the standards. All students in grade 3, 59% of our kids fall into either meeting or exceeding the standards. But when you take a look at that same grade and you break out just the students with disability subgroup data, only 13% are in that category of meeting or exceeding. That's a big difference. But if you take a look and you compare the grade 3 here, 59%, when you look at all students, to the state, all students is 52%. We're doing pretty good. We're pretty much on par, doing a little bit better than the state average when we look at all students. But again, this is the comparison here, our subgroup at grade 3 and the subgroup across the state for grade 3. Again, it's still very low, but somewhat comparable to our performance. So I'll just hop over here for a second and show you the mean student growth percentile. Previously, the old model, they used to report this on the median. The median is if you take all of the scores and rank order them in sequential order, you figure out which of these points is exactly in the middle of a rank order. That's the median. Now they've transitioned based on research that's been done that indicates that looking at the average or the mean is a much more dependable way to determine the growth. The reason that you'll see spots that say no data available in 3rd grade, that's the first year they take the test, so we can't compare their growth compared to last year because they didn't take the test last year. There are other points along these slides that I'll show you that say data not available. If they did not have a subgroup that was large enough, a group of students large enough to calculate that had been with us for a certain amount of time, they may not be able to calculate the growth data. So in other words, they're actually taking into consideration now, rather than rating us and our performance as to how we prepared a child, if the child hasn't been with us for a certain amount of time, it's not really fair and accurate to reflect back to us on our performance in preparing the child because they weren't here. So now they are factoring that in when they determine growth data. So again, I'll move through these slowly so that you can take a look, but that's the setup. Those are the numbers that you want to be taking a look at each grade. You take a look at the all students, which would be the first number. Compare that to the state all students. But I think you also want to be comparing all students to the subgroup performance as well. I would point out that when we take a look at our growth data, this is really the only one, and it's close, the only one that falls below what's considered moderate growth. Moderate growth is considered anywhere in that 40 up to 60. So if you fall, like as an example, The state performance with the students with disabilities subgroup of 42.8%. That falls between the 40 and up to the 60. That's moderate growth. That's what you would expect in terms of growth for a school year. So it's a little bit concerning that we're not even hitting the moderate growth here for fourth grade, but we are close to that 40 as a threshold. Now I'll move to the math for Turkey Hill. Again, you can see that the combined numbers for all students in the meeting and exceeding categories, it's still a pretty low percentage combined. We have lots of room to grow there. But then it's really something of concern to see the really low percentages of the combined kiddos falling into the meeting and exceeding category with our subgroup. So we do have some work to do there, for sure. Okay, and then move on to science. You can see it's interesting that the combined score for our students with disabilities is actually better here with science. Could be due to the more hands-on nature. Okay, middle school. These are our scores for English language arts. And again, you can see all of the average student growth percentiles listed there. We do fall into the moderate category for all of them. Again, having combined meeting and exceeding only hovering around that 50%. That means 50% of the kids are not meeting expectations or partially meeting expectations. And math, we did a little bit better with math. We did a good bit better than the state with all of our students, grade 6, 7, and 8 in math. And science, again, we did a good bit better than the state on that as well. And now we'll take a look at high school. And again, you'll notice that at the top of the columns, you've got proficient advanced rather than meeting or exceeding, because we're back to reporting on the legacy test.
How long does that test stay with us?
They're taking a look at that now. I'll call to your attention, 99% of our kiddos fall in the proficient or advanced category for ELA. And even the 10th grade students fall in that combined score up to 82%. So you can see that they are making some good, they are having some good outcome by the time they're hitting that 10th grade test, which is the test that determines whether or not they graduate with a diploma. Here's the math. We're a little bit lesser on the math, at 84% combined. And then the science, and at the high school level, for the most part, kiddos are taking the biology test. Although I believe, based on data, we maybe had one student take chemistry and
Correct.
one take physics.
I believe so. I believe you're right.
Yeah. So again, doing really well. 88% proficient advanced. And I will say that you don't have to score proficient to have met the threshold to earn your certificate for your competency determination for a high school diploma in science. That threshold is lower at the needs improvement category. So even more students met the criteria to earn their diploma than is reflected here. Some of our students do not participate in the traditional MCAS, either the legacy test or the next generation test. These students are taking the MCAS Alt portfolio assessment. On behalf of these students, the teachers put together portfolios that have work that demonstrate how the student is meeting the standard, and those entire portfolios are submitted and scored and then returned to the school. So you can see that our students scored either in the emerging category, where they're demonstrating a simple understanding of a limited number of learning standards, or progressing, where they are demonstrating partial understanding of a limited number of learning standards. And we did have one portfolio that was scored as incomplete, and that had to do with snow days. We can get into that if you have questions. There is good news in this data. We've taken a look, and there's some things to be really excited about. When we take a look at our ELA data at grade 3, the percentage of kiddos in the meeting exceeding category jumped up 21% compared to last year. So that's great news. Our students with disability subgroup in that meeting standards category bumped up by 13%, and the not meeting bumped up by 12%. Grade 5, students with disability subgroup in the not meeting standards. We want to see that number go down, so we've got a -9 there. Grade 7, the students with disability subgroup bumped up to 6% in meeting standards. Grade 8, that same subgroup. This is really exciting. We saw a decline of 20% in the not meeting. So that means 20% of the kids are now partially meeting, or better than partially meeting. So that's very good news. When we take a look at math, grade 4, the students with disability subgroup, meeting standards bumped up 12%. That same subgroup, meeting standards bumped up 14% in grade 5. And we saw a decline of kiddos in the not meeting standards, down, again, almost another 20% of kids moving on out of that lowest category. Grade 6, the subgroup, again, we saw a decline of 10%. Those kids are now performing better than they were compared to last year's grouping. And 8th grade, we saw a bump up in the meeting standards category of 26%. And the not meeting went down by 6. So that's all really good news when we dig in and start looking at the data. Where we need to dig in and do a little bit deeper analysis, I've already mentioned the grade 4, that student growth percentile is below that moderate range at 38.5. We also have reports that we can look at results by standard. And when we take a look at the results by standard, in that report they break out the question type. We know that the 4th grade, when we look at the question type essays, we underperformed the state on that type of question by 14 points. Constructed responses, the students with disability subgroup underperformed the state by 16 points. Now when we take a look at the actual standards, conventions of standard English, all students performed below the state by 13 points, and the students with disability subgroup by 12. Text, types, and purposes, all students underperformed 13 points. Students with disabilities underperformed 11 points. They did a little bit better than the all students group. It may have something to do with the graphic organizers that their teachers are using with them when they plan their writing. 5th grade, when we take a look again, same thing, essay. 5th graders underperformed by 10 points. Again, text, type, and purpose. underperformed by 11 points. Grade 6, we've got to take a look at why the meeting and exceeding standards fell 14%. Grade 7, when we take a look at all students scoring the not meeting standards, that's the lowest category, that bumped up by 6%. We've got to take a look at that. And the subgroup for that same category, that was a big bump. We've got to take a look at what's going on there. Math. Grade 3, students with disability subgroup scoring the meeting expectations. We saw that dip 15%. The not meeting standards, which is the lowest category, actually climbed by 8. So that's not going in the direction that we want to see. When we take a look at the standards, again for math, students with disabilities, that subgroup struggled with multiplying and dividing. And you can see that in different standards, that same concept comes through again and again, that multiplying and dividing. Take a look at the 4th grade. Again, you see factors and multiples as an area of underperformance, and fractions for 4th grade. And you know, if you had to ask an educator, what do you think is going to be the area? Fractions is usually one of the go-to answers for that question. Grade 6. We take a look at standards. It's the students with disabilities subgroup that underperformed on the standard related to equations and inequalities. And grade 7, our students with disabilities subgroup, in terms of the meeting standards category, we saw a dip of 11%. That's not going in the direction that we want to go. So what are our next steps? We're going to do some additional in-depth analysis. We have lots and lots of ways to look at the data. The data's been made available to teachers. They've already started looking at some of the data. We can look at reports by curriculum standard. We can look at question type. We can look at the actual questions themselves if they are released by the Department of Ed. Some of them, from time to time, they don't release all of them. Some of them they hold back. We can look at the data by school, by grade, by class, and individual students. As far as the ELA, the big takeaways from what you saw in detail in the previous slides, grades 4 and 5, we have to focus some resources on essay writing, specifically targeting conventions, text types, and purposes. And in math, grades 3 and 4, we need to focus on multiplication and fractions. In grade 6, we've got to focus a little bit there on equations and inequalities. And it's important that everybody understand that the data that we get from the state relative to this test and the way that we can look at it all, this data can be used to measure progress on educator goals, or school improvement goals, district improvement goals. It can be used to inform decision-making as far as what do we need for curriculum materials, what do we need for professional development, what do we need for staffing. In addition, you may see some of this data cycle back around as part of a justification for the FY20 budget. This I added because I'm not sure when you ever get an update on the Access for ELS test. So I thought I would throw this in. 32 students were tested. That means that 86% of our students participated in testing. We didn't meet a 95% participation threshold here, so there's some room for growth in terms of participation. 56% of the students, 27 students, were deemed as making progress. And again, that's additional data that teachers can use to work with students.
That was 27
27 of the students.
out of the 32, but that was
That tested,
56%.
yeah.
I think math's off.
27 students.
56.
Oh.
are the
Okay.
56%. Okay, so that was a lot of information.
So,
We are still digesting, honestly, because there is so much information to look through. These are kind of the highlights, the big kind of, what do you look for, what do you take away quickly? The work to dig in, that's underway. But I do have the principals from the buildings that have MCAS data. They're here, they can answer questions. Juliana Hanscom, who oversees our special ed programming, is here and available to answer questions as well.
relative to the good news,
Yep.
are we also going to be doing a deeper analysis on what caused those increases and how those increases happened? See if they can translate into the other ones that were not as good?
Yep,
Yes.
that's part of the key, you know. It's like, what are we doing so well? We need to replicate.
Right, because
Yeah.
what you pointed out for things that needed the analysis were all relatively negative results.
Yeah, those are areas of super concern that we really need to start to understand what's happening there. I think when teachers get in teams and they see the good news, they are aware of different strategies that they tried that might have resulted in that. And the principals would also be potentially aware through department heads at the high school if there was a shift that caused a really great bump like that. How'd that happen? And how can we share that information out? And we might be looking to share some tips and strategies from, let's say, the middle school down to the elementary school if the teachers have found something that has been particularly successful. It can potentially translate vertically.
I would think so.
Yeah. Other questions?
Individually, by grade level, in any grade, what is your plan sort of year to year? You get this information on the early end in the year. Working with your teachers on a grade level basis, how are you, making a strategy individually? Maybe the math team needs something different than the ELA team needs. How do you help facilitate change within curriculum to potentially see difference the next spring when tests are taken again?
Do you want it? So we get some of the preliminary data in the summer, so that's some of my summer work is looking over those kind of MCAS scores. So when teachers come on that first day before the students get there for the professional development, they already have a layout of what their students scored last year, their scores of the kids that are coming into them. They have their individual classroom scores, and they're not just, if they taught 3 ELA courses, they have the individual scores for those different 3 ELA courses and how it compared against the state standard. So how did my kids score, as well as individual student score and error analysis. And what we do at the middle school is we have a results model of improvement. So once a month for faculty meeting, all 6th grade or all math teachers and the ELA teachers get together and they look at those. And that actually becomes part of their self-reflection in the evaluation process. They have to say, 17% of my kids were in needs improvement on our inequalities question. That's going to be a focus for me this year to kind of look in depth. So it's a continuous improvement by looking at the data, and that's how we do it at the middle school. So they actually report out what their strengths are and what their areas of improvement are. And we always try to focus on what those strengths can be. And when you compare cohort to cohort, you need to be careful because of the individual students' needs might be different as you go grade 6 2018, grade 6 2019. That's why they kind of built in that growth model where you can compare from 2 years of data together and look at how you are doing as well as a student's growth from where you got them to where they were when you left. And our growth scores still seem to be strong, so that's the good news. We do need to look into those areas of improvement for our subgroups, and those are always an area where we can improve. But that's how we kind of look at the data, and teachers have become very comfortable with interpreting that, and we do that as a group and as a collective almost, and report out where they feel that they need to improve upon.
So at the elementary school, I would say what we did, especially in ELA this year, is we looked by the standard, which is one of the slides that she talks about. So we were able to identify that for 4th and 5th grade, it's the writing that's particularly challenging and causing such a dip. And so then we looked at the specific questions that the state actually released to us, and because we were looking for like a trend. What is this about? Is it all kinds of writing? And we were able to identify, and this was both at 4th and 5th grade, that the questions were specifically around what is the author's perspective, or can you rewrite the story from one of the characters' perspectives? So that was writing that, as a former 7th grade ELA teacher, I thought was pretty sophisticated, and so that needs to be an area of focus for us this year, and that's why we dedicated our professional development to the Empowering Writers. And so then if they all attend that Empowering Writers training, and then we come back and we have vertical teaming about what does that look like in grades 4 and then to grade 5, and using the same language and vocabulary and expectations around it, we're hoping to target the writing. So that's my example, right? You look at the particular standard that we have a deficit in, and then questions specific to that.
And it's great to hear the vertical piece of it, so how it translates year to year, because some of the verbiage, I would think, they'll see it in 3 again, and they'll see it again on that test in 4, and they'll see it again in test on 5.
Right.
So
Right.
if they get comfortable with it, that's a good thing.
And at the high school, the work is really being done in departments.
Correct. I do very similar to Tim. We do a lot of summer work, and we were in the office together looking at things, and then I would break it out through the department heads. And we actually have one of the after-school meetings, like Tim does. We dedicate that to common planning in departments where they're looking at data and how to improve.
Students with disabilities, how do you go about trying to figure out a way to close that gap a little bit?
So the special education teachers participate in the same types of activities at each of the schools with those teachers, with the regular ed teachers as a group. So they may be looking at the 4th grade and the 4th grade teacher is a part, or the 4th grade special ed teacher is a part of that group to try to look at it and do it that way. But we have to understand too that some of these students aren't being picked up, especially for reading ELA type stuff, until like a 3rd to 4th that they have learning disabilities.
Right.
Because that's when we usually see it peak. So they might not have been given the direct instruction yet in the areas where we're finding the disability. So that 3rd, 4th grade area may not show as much growth as what we're able to do as they get older, because they haven't been given that targeted intervention yet, because they may have just been newly diagnosed with it. So, and I think that's just the nature of developmental, in the development of students.
One of the other things too is that we can start to think about working with special educators in a vertical team model as well, where they can look at the subgroup data against standards and do an assessment of their own relative to what are the weak areas, and try to tease out, and sometimes it can be pretty complicated, is the error based in the content, or is the error due to the nature of the disability, right? And it can be tough to tease that out, but it really does take, eyes on and having that vertical conversation with colleagues to try to discriminate a bit what the nature of the challenge is.
Right. The only additional thing I wanted to add that cannot be answered right now is a wondering I have about how this is going to impact budget. Now that we've had 2 years and we've seen some analysis of that, what kind of programming needs and things are you starting to think about that are going to help improve those areas of deficit?
Literacy, 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 right? And I'm so glad to hear, where is he? That at the primary school, that grant is in place. Those are the kids who come up to us, right? So any professional development around literacy, both the reading, the Reader's Workshop model. Last year when we got our MCAS scores, you can look at the district profiles across the state, and so I just took Central Mass and I literally called other districts who had very high scores and said, what reading program are you using? What reading program are you using? And the majority were using that Readers and Writers Workshop model. Okay, all right. And then you go forward from that, right? And you try to find professional development around that. So we've been without a curriculum director for years. I don't know when Karen Martin was last here.
6, I believe.
Right. So you have no captain of that ship. You're sort of all, he's captaining his school, I'm captaining mine, and we're trying to find our way through it. But you need a solid, like a literacy coach or a curriculum coordinator who can really guide you as a district, right? As a whole K to 8 or whatever to move it forward. You're throwing that question out there. I'm right there with that answer.
And that's one of the things I would suggest as a bonus to approaching the development of the budget in a different way this year. We will be looking at that vertical piece and the needs of the district-wide with a more unified, comprehensive kind of lens, laying out the plan, how do we best use our resources to have an impact. So that's a little bit of the plan. No other questions? Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for figuring out all this new
I was going to say, this
Yeah.
was an incredibly
That's a Herculean task.
easy to look at, yet comprehensive breakdown of,
Complex data.
yes,
Yeah.
complex data, seeing it all, and, in layman's terms,
Yeah.
this is where we are and this is what the data is. So,
I literally could have put together a binder of data.
could have.
for you.
Sure.
And, we could really do a workshop for us just to help you all understand the depth of data that we have access to and how we're dissecting that on a regular
Like you
basis.
alluded to, there's a lot more that you can go into.
Oh my gosh,
in
there's
this,
so much more.
But what you provided gave us a good, broad view of it with enough detail to see where the ups and downs were.
Yeah, and that's the key. It's great to celebrate the good stuff that's going on, right? And it's still early in the lifespan of this next generation MCAS. This is only year 2. We will, with time, as we did with the original MCAS, with time you start to, when you analyze and you look at the questions and what the kids are expected to do, you come to have a deeper understanding, and you are in a better place to prepare them to do well. And again, as we continue to look at the nature of how this new test is putting demands on the kids, tell us what you know, we may need to make some shifts and some tweaks. But it's a journey, for sure, that we're on. And we'll keep looking at data, and there'll be some recommendations for maybe some changes structurally to how we're doing the work, who's involved with the work, that kind of thing, to make it a little bit more meaningful, more impactful.
Well, you have some ammunition here to inform us in terms of the prioritization of the budget with our
Yes.
new budget goal, right?
Yeah.
It's for the impact to the education, quality education of our students.
Right.
So we've got a lot of data that
Yep.
you'll be using to back up any requests that come to us.
Yep.
And we at least have a basic understanding.
Right.
I'll venture to say at this point of what we're looking at.
Right. And we may get lucky and see pockets of places where you've got really good increases. To see an increase of 26%, that's phenomenal. But on the flip side, to see a decrease of 39% was heartbreaking. So, it's finding that balance of not taking so much focus, resources and energy and focusing on too narrow a focus that you let go of all the good stuff that you've been doing and you've got going on, so that you're trading off, we saw an increase here, but then we saw a decrease here. It's that what feels sometimes elusive, finding that balance where you keep going with all the stuff that has been good, but we're making some gains with some things that we need to make gains with. And honestly, it may take a couple of years before we're really starting to see some traction. It takes a little bit of time, because particularly if you're talking about shifting the nature of the instruction, the way we teach literacy, that kind of an impact, it is going to take a couple of years to see some really meaningful change.
Getting third and fourth graders to look at something from somebody else's perspective, that just feels Herculean to me, for somebody to be able to do
From
that.
their ecocentric world
Yes.
to
Because
thinking
everything's
about...
about me when at
Right.
that age. Well,
Even that
in
word,
some cases, the kid
even that word,
yeah.
stopping in,
Perspective.
yes.
Yeah.
Just being aware of it and being able to work with it. That was a great example we were given.
Right.
But
even for the teachers to be aware of it, that's the phrase that keeps coming up in questions
Right.
over and over again.
Right.
Are we using that phrase so
Yes.
that they'll recognize and they'll know when they're being asked
what that means.
what that means, right? So,
Great vocabulary word for
but I'm telling you, when they absolutely can, and seriously, when we get them there and I take you in for a little visit, it'll blow your mind to listen to them talking with the vocabulary that they'll be talking with. It's amazing. It's amazing. I've seen it in classrooms in other districts. It's like, wow. Very impressive. But yeah, if you have the expectation and you believe that they can, and you teach them with the right kinds of instruction and scaffolding, they'll get there. They absolutely will get there.
all in literacy in primary school. It's all on Mr. McKenna's shoulders.
Yeah, it's all.
And the fine teachers over there.
Yeah, so moving on, old business. In discussion, review of charter language.
So relative to the charter, we had, there was language regarding the school committee appointing, electing, selecting. What word do we want to use relative to the school committee bringing on a new superintendent? Let me see if I can find the actual language for that. I should have been more prepared. I apologize.
I was going to say, I might have it, but I have the selectmen language because I wondered if we should be consistent with what the selectmen had as town manager when they appoint the town manager. I wondered if we should be
I had a point here as my
consistent
word.
and use appoint as well. But I had the number of the article for the selectmen, but I didn't write down the number of the article for us. So
I got it.
sorry.
It's section 3.3 of the charter, subsection B1. It says and it originally said to elect a superintendent of schools. They changed it to select a superintendent of schools. Or is there a better word that we want? Or do we-
Elect clearly isn't.
I don't
This
wanna-
is
I don't
not a
like
vote.
elect.
Well,
It's different
It's not-
than
it's not a
voting
voting,
with
yeah.
the...
Yeah, it feels like people would be running.
correct.
That.
Right. It's not a candidacy, so...
So we,
We went through a selection process, so is it...
And then we appointed is the word I keep coming back to.
That's the one I'm thinking of as well.
And that would be consistent with both the appointing of the town manager and appointing of the head librarian at the library. Those are both in the charter as appointing, unless they're changing that as we speak. You don't know.
I don't know, we haven't had a meeting in 2 months, so there's my, a few weeks.
So does that word feel like a good choice
I'm
for
okay
us?
with that.
I think
I
appointing
think
makes
so.
more sense.
Are we voting?
Well, we can make, there's no harm in voting.
Our recommendation to
Our
them,
recommendation then is,
we'll make a vote to recommend
The word appoint within our
in the
language.
language in regards to superintendent.
yeah,
Okay.
so just that.
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to, what did I just say? Make a motion to recommend the use of the word appoint in the language in regards to the superintendent.
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Just one little thing.
So we are up to our third and final reading of policies 1202, 1700, and 2200. Superintendent Bowman, have we had any feedback?
I don't believe that we have.
So 1700 was just clarifying the acronym of the PTO. I wouldn't
Yes.
anticipate too much.
Too much around that.
Was just eliminating the line about us being in conjunction with, the track and field being in conjunction with the Parks Commission, because that has been separated, so that line isn't needed since we're not in conjunction with them. And the last one was 2200, which just clarified some language about prior to the presentation of the contract of employment to principal, that would only need to come before us if said terms adversely affected the budget. So as long as it was within budgetary expectations, that it didn't necessarily need
Have
to
to
come
come before the
us
school
for
committee.
approval. Superintendent could move on that.
So if this is the third reading, then are we voting to approve the policies
If there are no changes, I think that's...
with no changes?
Yes. So I'll take a motion.
Do we need to actually read them all out, or...
You can vote to waive the
We-
reading.
Yes.
Okay.
Motion, I'll take a motion first, then to waive the third and final reading.
I'll move to waive the third and final reading for policy numbers 1202, 1700, and 2200 as described by Ms. Weiss.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So then we need
Now we'll
to
make a motion to approve policies 1202, 1700, and 2200 as outlined on our website with...
All right, I'll
With
make
their updates.
I'll make a motion to approve policy updates on 1202, 1700, and 2200 as outlined on our webpage and documents.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Public comment? Phyllis, come on.
Phyllis Scott, 50 Sunset Lane. I really appreciated the presentation on MCAS. I taught fourth grade for about 15 years, so I was in the trenches when MCAS started, so I get it. But my head was swimming, and I really liked the way you summarized it at the end and gave us the big picture. One question I have, though, is there any focus on earlier disability identification? You know, when Ms. Hanson was talking about that's part of the issue, that they just don't know. In my son actually is dyslexic, and the school didn't figure it out till we took him to Children's at the end of 3rd grade, because we went, it wasn't in this district. He's just not, and he was reading at a beginning 1st grade level at the end of 3rd grade, because they just kept throwing different stuff at him, and it just didn't work. So I really do feel that early identification could be a key to helping kids with disabilities, just figuring it out. He actually ended up getting a doctorate in economics from UC Davis, so they figured it out, yes. But it was very tough in the beginning, and I think that if there's some focus can be put on that, I could.
Would you like me to address it? Yes. So, and I think you might be able to jump in, use your expertise and back this up as well. Particularly in the early grades, the development of the skills required for reading in particular. Some kiddos just are not developmentally ready, and when it clicks, it clicks. And that could take research, at least the research that I'm familiar with, and maybe there's new research that's contrary, but it could take up until they're about 8 years old.
8 years old.
So we would potentially be identifying an area of disability that isn't truly an area of disability if they're just developmentally not quite ready there yet. One of the things that we're working on as part of the strategic plan, Supporting All Learners, is that RTI model, that response to intervention. So making sure that we can administer some reading assessments to kiddos with some reliability, fidelity. Teachers know how to administer the assessments, know how to interpret the results, and plan appropriate interventions and monitor the progress during the intervention. Because if you keep doing what you're doing and it isn't working, then you really shouldn't be doing it anymore. You should find a different intervention.
Yeah, like the 2nd grade teacher said at the end of the year, I don't know, it just didn't work for him.
Yeah, well, no, you know, in today, that's not an okay response. Right? So it really, we've got to take a comprehensive look at what literacy instruction looks like in the district. Okay? I'll be coming forward with a more formalized plan, but in my mind right now, I will be forming a district team to focus on literacy. Where are we at currently? What is our vision? How do we get there? How many years is it going to take? What's the sequential step? You know, what would we do in year 1, year 2, year 3 to get us to where we would like to see the district in terms of literacy instruction?
Beginning with the end in mind.
Exactly. It really and truly is. You've got to move forward in a way that recognizes the limitations that we have in terms of, financial resource. But you also have to be cognizant of the fact that too much change all at once for teachers is not typically the kind of change that will be sustained. Or actually internalized and implemented.
And you also can't even track it if you change too much.
Right. So you need a lot of things. You need professional development for staff, and I'm not talking about the one-day workshops or even 3 days of workshop out. I'm talking about partnering with a consultant so that we have them here, job embedded, on-site, working with teachers, coaching them. potentially a literacy coach here as part of our staff to work with teachers all of the time, in between those visits with consultants. Because transitioning the way you teach day in and day out,
It's huge.
it's a big shift. It's a big shift. So ideally having a coach, a literacy coach as part of the staff would be huge. You've got to make sure you've got the right kinds of assessment tools, that teachers know how to administer them well and score them and interpret those scores, and then translate that data to an intervention, know how they're going to progress monitor that intervention, when to pull the plug if it's not working, right? And if it is working, great, we see progress. What's next? It's a big picture, multiple prongs to look at here with this, and it really does have to be mapped out. You have to have a plan and a strategy. What are the pieces that we need? What do we have to do to make this happen? How many years is it going to take? What's the plan to get us to where we need to be?
Now, or do you think that especially in the primary school, keeping class sizes smaller?
So here's the interesting thing about that. The research is not, it's really not very compelling around class size.
Wow.
There's no solid data, consistent solid data that indicates small class size equates to increased performance. That said, particularly at the kindergarten level,
Kindergarten, first grade.
you really can't be creeping up any higher than where we are. And we're lucky in that we have a paraprofessional in each of those kindergarten classes, so the adult-to-student ratio is reduced. Nonetheless, I would say that the class sizes, particularly for kindergarten, are at an absolute max. I wouldn't want to see them any more than they are. So, again, the data is just not readily available and compelling.
The only data I've ever seen on that, you had to get the numbers down to like 14 to 16 students, like such a cut that it's not fiscally responsible or feasible sustainable for any population.
Really, yeah, 15 kids in a class would be gorgeous, but it's just, you can't pay.
We wouldn't have enough room.
Space for it.
Yeah, and you just can't pay for it.
No, you can't.
But
It's very interesting. I would have thought that there would be a data that would say like 20 is the best for like kindergarten.
No, but I
first
think,
grade.
most educators sort of pick that round about 20 to 25 as
Oh, yeah, you
consistent
certainly
best
don't want to go
practice.
more than 25 in a primary, if at all possible. That's a lot of bodies.
It is.
Okay, thank you very much.
Very welcome.
Thank you.
So our reports, charter review.
We did not meet last week. The holidays kind of put things out of kilter, so we'll be meeting hopefully next week.
Athletic advisory.
I think.
Hmm?
I think 24th.
Yeah, next Wednesday, sorry.
24th.
It's
Next
Wednesday.
Yeah. Athletic advisory.
Let's see, have we met since then? So we met, when was that? September 4th, October 2nd. So we've had a meeting in here.
Yes,
Since
you
then.
reported on October
Okay.
3rd.
So the next meeting for the Athletic Advisory Council is Tuesday the 6th at 6:30 in this room. We are meeting monthly now at this point, on the first Tuesday of the month. So November 6th is also Election Day. The group didn't have a problem with coming in on Election Day to vote or to do this meeting. So that's when we're getting together again.
Finance committee.
I did not attend, but I watched it, and there was some discussion about not having to tax to the 2.5 limit, and making sure that that was clear in the policy, that you don't have to do that. There was also an indication that there would be a future discussion on OPEB liability, which is the post-employment benefits that are being paid. And although obviously teacher pensions do not fall to the town, health insurance definitely does. And a need to keep that liability down, obviously. So when that discussion comes up, the school department committee, someone will need to be involved in that discussion. So other than that, it was basically warrants for town meeting and such. So.
And Blizzard Bag Advisory.
The Blizzard Bag Advisory. I'm hoping we are ready to get started. I'm hoping to get a list of names, and as soon as I have those names in emails, I will send out availability on dates to get started. I would like to meet twice a month to try and get this through. In speaking to the school council, so now I'm jumping ahead, but at the elementary school, they were very excited about it, but also talked about the need for an educational portion to go out before the survey. That what a Blizzard bag is to one person is not what it is to the other person. So to have an educational component, so I think probably we would need to start with that and then go to the survey, because as Dr. Burnham had sent me a advisory from DESE about the rules having to do with Blizzard bags, or they call them alternate structured learning days, and that you have to report your plan within a week of having approved it, and that type of thing. So we need to have some education go out along with the survey. So the plan would be then to come up with a definition of what we are calling this alternative structured learning day process, and then work on a survey to all school community members. So that's what the plan would be. So that's where we are.
And we're just short 2 members at this point. I still am waiting for a name of a staff member from the primary, and I'm still waiting for a name of a parent to represent middle high school. And then
And then we're good to go. All right. Policy Subcommittee, we will be meeting Monday night.
Monday day.
Monday day. I'm sorry. We are 1:30. I know. I'm so used to saying night. It is day. Thank you. PTO.
PTO met this Monday. Dr. Burnham was there to give an update, so same kind of updates that we hear at the school committee, so I'm not going to go into all of those details. There were representatives from the ROAR talking about substance abuse in the teen brain, and that's going to be, their next program is going to be on November 1st, substance abuse in the teen brain, and there's a presentation at 6:30, and it begins at 6, however, with some resources to look at prior to that. Then the PTO went into discussing penny wars, which we heard about. Barnes & Noble's tonight is still scheduled for November 15th. That's Thursday evening, and there should be a survey volunteer spot or something coming out soon to get readers for that. And they're still seeking maybe some student work to present at that event. So they're looking into that, adding that to the schedule. And Miles for Miles course is this Sunday. The next meeting is November 19th in this room. And that will be with the building principals.
School council, although we just had a nice update. From each, we did. Did anyone else have a meeting since October 3rd that there was something different?
We met, but it was
all
the
covered.
substance of what Mrs. Shanahan said.
Capital planning. Which is Heather, who is not here. And topics for future discussion.
No.
Are we going to get a check-in from Extended Day?
We talked about that, and we will bring back an update with some recommendations for next year.
Yeah.
Along with the revised handbook that would accompany those recommendations. And we were looking at potentially late February, early March. I'd like to see what the kindergarten registration looks like numbers-wise, because that may impact need for space at the primary. So there may need to be some consideration of relocation of the early learning center, not as much the before school and after school. So it would be, I would like to have her come back in after I have some preliminary numbers for kindergarten registration. But yes, we'll be back. Yep.
And are the school committee goals, are they popping up on another agenda soon? We kind of work them
We
out.
can- we can
I don't know
certainly-
when the next time was to talk about them, like, how we're starting to implement them.
Yeah, you should probably put that on agendas periodically, just as a touch point as to the progress that is being made. Additionally, relative to the protocols, you're still going to have to actually develop and agree to the protocols. We wrote the goal.
So we might need to talk about it and maybe develop a workshop or something.
I was just going to say, do you need
Yeah.
one more workshop to tie everything together?
Yeah.
For the protocols.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I'll take a look at a calendar and select a date to do another workshop meeting. I can send a couple of options out and see about availability.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. And our November 7th meeting is the joint meeting. Would you want to put potentially the school committee goals on an agenda for the second meeting in November? Or do you want to wait until December?
December gets rough with the budget.
The old way we did the budget.
All right. So maybe
We'll be doing all the hard work behind the scenes.
so perhaps looking at both of those agendas and seeing just where it might fit better.
Okay. Yeah.
What do you guys think? As opposed to if we have one meeting that's heavier and one that's
Sure.
lighter.
So I
put
can
it
work
on
that out with the chairs,
So,
and
right.
we'll look at potentially late November, early December to have the school committee goals back on as old business.
We've got, looks like full calendars for end of November, early December.
Well, again, some of those things on there
Yeah.
won't be coming forward.
Right.
Because they'll be happening
Yep.
behind the scenes.
Okay.
Then that was our last agenda item. So I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I can move to adjourn the meeting at 8:55.
Second?
Second. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.